Dan, it's great to be here with you again. This report, Cost of a Data Breach, is definitely one of my favorite reports through the year because it brings us real cases. It brings us data from companies that got breached. I don't see anything better than a reality to look at, what we can do better and looking at the trends that are shaping our industry. From the key themes of the report, we are seeing an increase in the cost of a data breach. It went up 4.45 million dollars on average across the globe. If we look at the trend in the past 3 years, went up 15%, and we're seeing that though companies that have been breached are they have to foot the paying for whatever happened at the breach. Only 51% of them are saying they are going to increase their security investments, and 57% say, no, we're just going to roll it to the consumer. We're going to have our customers foot the bill for the data breach that we suffered. So that has been an interesting factor here. Of course, one of the most important things we do during this report is try to understand what has been a cost mitigator for companies. And time and again, we're seeing that AI and the use of automation in security is a major factor in reducing the amount of time that it takes teams to contain, to detect, to contain, and to shorten the breach lifecycle. So again, this year was amazing results. People or companies that extensively deployed AI and automations across their environments saw the savings of 40%. So about over $1 million of their breach costs from the average, as well as 108 days in the breach life cycle, which to me, I'm sorry to say, it's almost better than $1 million, because the entire, company and the churn it causes amongst employees, amongst having to really manage all the recovery activities. If you're saving over 3 months of that, you really are winning. And I would say it's probably way more than $1 million. Obviously, the bigger breaches that we see are extremely costly. So this cost is usually a lot higher.
I want to pin that and come back to that because that is a really interesting statistic. But let's rewind to one of the first data points that you mentioned, uh, which is that companies appear to be passing on the cost of a data breach to their customers. This is new. Why?
So it's not very new, right? It started after the pandemic that we started
Mm,
seeing it, the cost of data breach. The companies are passing on the costs. We thought it was a thing about, supply chain costs are rising. Maybe they have no other way to balance the books anymore with data breaches, with a lot of attacks that started emerging, especially, during and after the pandemic. But we're seeing this now 3 years later, that companies are admitting and saying, we're not going to grow our security investment. We're actually just going to transfer the costs over. The good trend is that before it used to be more to the tune of 80% of companies that used to roll the costs over. Now it's kind of a split, right? It's about 57%. It's a little less. So we still have 51% of companies that are saying we are going to grow our security investment, especially seeing, what is causing the costs during the data breach. It's that whole detection, containment, recovery activities. Those things are the big cost augmenters, right? So they're like, okay, so we will increase our investment there in order to reduce breach costs in the future.
I wonder if that's really interesting that it's a post-pandemic trend, and it makes a lot of sense that after the pandemic norms would shift. What do you see? Often when we think about cyber and generative AI or AI in general, we're talking about things like attack surface management. But you mentioned that there are a number of other factors, including mitigation, that AI helps with. Help me understand that a little bit more, these other factors.
Actually, I wanted to understand them as well. So I asked questions around that because I said, hey, you know what? I'm a consultant for cyber crisis management. I'm like, my customers would love to know. What
Yeah,
did you do to
me
save
too.
those 108 days? I want to know exactly. So, security leaders are benefiting by implementing the capabilities of AI. They say that they are saving by the ability to triage tier one threats more effectively. So, in other words, they're having automation do it instead of humans constantly sit on and triage, and they're also reducing false positives and noise. So the better AI is trained, the longer it's trained, they're able to actually cut through the noise of a lot of alerts and the whole alert fatigue. We know it from the security domain so well. They're using behavioral analytics to look at suspicious behavior, but also predict other threats that could be coming their way. And also, they're doing a lot of automated data enrichment and second screen capability augmentation, which lets their employees actually work better, work faster, less burnout, less repetitive tasks, and stuff like that. So that's been really helpful for them in saving more money by deploying more AI. And we're, like I said, we're seeing that they're saving about 40% of the breach costs because they contain it quicker. And that's supported by other data points in the report. So, for example, those who contain under 200 days save about $1 million. And those who don't have data automation and AI, 40% of those breaches were the longer and costlier breaches. So those are interesting data points that support this as well.
How are attackers changing? Are they becoming more diverse? Are they are their techniques becoming more diverse?
So I think attackers, their art is learning what everybody's doing. I mean, they're kind of studying networks day in and day out, right? They want to continue to be effective. They're looking at security controls, how to bypass those things, how to trick humans. So they continue to do everything that they're doing, but they're also trying to leverage all these, new technologies. And what can they do with that? Where can they go with generative AI? Can they start doing more fraudulent transactions and, looking at ways that they can leverage those kinds of things? Can they, obviously looking at all the ways they can poison AI, they can, manipulate AI data, etc. So attackers are always, unfortunately, even at the forefront of everything that we do as organizations, right? And we have to continue evolving as they do as well.
Well, how will the next uh, say 6, 12, 18 months of cyber plus generative AI play out? This has been kind of an explosion, or at least the last 12 months or so have really felt like an explosion across the tech landscape, not just with cybersecurity, but specifically and particularly with cyber, we will feel the impact of AI. Every business and every consumer will feel it. So help me look ahead. Tell me how we're going to feel the impact of AI in cybersecurity.
I think that I can compare it to a lot of other trends that have started. When we even just as recent as the pandemic, when people had to rush kind of to the cloud and, let's do things. We don't want to stay behind. We want to make this happen as soon as possible and kind of doing things a little too quickly. That just opens us to all the classics, right? Like there's, a lack of security. Maybe stuff hasn't been thought out. Maybe the environments they build on are not secure. Maybe the database is not secure or other things are open to certain types of attacks. And it's kind of like it just brings us back to that. As soon as we initiate a big trend, we sometimes forget security a little bit and then think about it after, which is always the worst thing to do, to kind of have it as an afterthought. So it's almost like, yes, we know everybody wants to rush, but take a moment, go back to how you're implementing this, go back to security by design, go back to all these layers of security that have to go into from project inception all the way through all your different cycles, and really think about the right way and the right type of project you want to implement there. And also, look at the organizations that offer the more responsible AI, that have more experience, that have been doing this with customers, that have, references, proof, use cases that you can look at for the enterprise environments. And then kind of you'll be able to have that sort of technology come to you already with a lot more security into, around it and inside it. So I think, everything we're seeing in terms of attacks, and, I sit on some conferences, steering committees. I've seen a lot of submissions about all the different attacks on, AI and AI systems and what could go wrong. It's out there, but there are just security basics even that help us prevent and protect.